Good morning everyone. In today's class, we will go through performance testing tool. It's an open source tool which is called JMeter. It is very popular in Bay Area and it is generally used by developers when they are writing their code and they just want to perform some load testing on their code, right? JMeter is basically a tool which is written in Java, so it needs a Java environment. So you need to have JDK 1.6 installed before you start downloading and installing JMeter. So it comes with for different platforms like for you Linux or Unix machines and for Windows platform. To download JMeter, you have to go to jmeter.apache.org, and if you see here there are download releases. So if you see here we have JMeter 2.9 is the latest version. It's an open source, so if you'll see like after a couple of months, like last time when I took my class it was JMeter 2.8, now it is 2.9. So every release comes with some kind of bug fixes, some new features. So this is a new release, and you can, if you are working on Windows, you have to download Apache JMeter 2.9.zip file. And one important thing is like it doesn't need any installation. It's a very lightweight tool, so you have to just unzip it into any of your directories. So you can actually create a directory called applications, just like I have done C apps and have installed all the uninstallable software here. So uninstallable software means that you won't see their installation in control panel. It is just a zip file, so it works in its own environment. It doesn't need any registry entries or anything like that. So if you see here, I have installed SQL Developer, JMeter, Eclipse, Sigmin. All these are non-installable softwares. So once you have downloaded that particular file, you need to unzip it in a folder just like this, and you will see Apache JMeter. I have 2.8. Then this is a directory structure of JMeter, and here if you see here we have a bin directory. In bin directory there are a couple of files which are required to run JMeter, and we have to start, if you are working on Windows, we need to start jmeter.bat file, right? So it's a batch file, and you have to just double click it. There could be another file with JMeter. So if you see, we have JMeter, jmeter.bat, .log, .properties, but you have to run .bat file. Sometimes the extensions are hidden in your directory, so you can actually go and see the type of the file. If the file type is Windows batch file, that file you have to double click. So when you double click it, something like this would come up, and it's going to start JMeter in a while. So this is the screen for Apache JMeter. It's a very simple GUI, because JMeter is used basically for load testing or performance testing or stress testing. I would say performance testing in general. So we do not want anything like which has a heavy interface, because since the client request should not take a lot of time to send the request to the server, right? So it is it's a very thoughtful you can say GUI, in the sense that it's very simple to understand. Anybody who doesn't have an any kind of experience can learn JMeter in just one day, right? So to install Java, you can actually just Google and find it out. You can say JDK 1.6 download. Here you need to install, go to this particular button which says JDK. So you don't have to install JRE, you need to install JDK, and click here. Then you need to accept the license, and depending upon the type of Windows you have, this is 32-bit and this is 64-bit. So all the latest Windows are generally 64-bit. So just make sure that you have 64-bit Windows, and then you can download this. And JDK takes a little while to install. So once you have downloaded and installed Java, you need to set the path. So what you have to do, you have to go to computer and set the environment variable. Go to system properties, advanced system settings, and environment variables. Otherwise, you can also simply just type in here environment or system variables. Edit the system environment variables. Again, the screen would come up. Here you would have one system variable path. In this system variable, you have to say edit, and if you see here, whatever is written there, you have to add this bin path to this variable value. Okay, so once you have added, so here my Java is installed in program files Java JDK 1.6. So once Java is installed, it would be somewhere in your program files. And you have to give the bin path. So you have to just copy this and paste it there in your variable value and press OK. So once it is all set, you can just test it whether it is running fine or not. Open your command line window and type Java C, or you can just simply type Java also. If something like this comes up, that means you have Java properly installed and configured on your machine. So once Java is installed, then you can start using JMeter. Okay. So before starting with JMeter, so whenever you are performing or whenever you are writing your test cases for performance testing, so there are a couple of things you need to keep in mind. So in most of the companies, all QAs, like there won't be any specific QAs for performance testing. Probably you might be doing the testing at your level, even if you are a functional tester or manual tester. So there are some questions that you need to ask your manager or BA and whoever is the owner of your product, that how many users. So there are actually certain three perspectives of doing performance testings. So one is business view, and the other is a user view, and the third is system view. So what do we mean by all these three perspectives? So from the owner of the application, from the one who owns the business, so let's say it's an online portal, or you can say it's any kind of web application. So how many concurrent users can access the application with some, you can say base response time. Okay, so this is how the owner or the business owner would look into performance testing. So if I have an application and I'm the owner of that application, so how many users can access my application at the same time? So let's say I have an online portal. So if n number of concurrent users means people who are accessing the application at the same time. So they may not be going through a particular page or a particular module at the same time, but they are browsing, right? So one application, there are multiple modules of that application. So if it's an let's say online library, so you have the search functionality, you have the browse functionality, you have the payment functionality, you have the you can say you can connect to public library. So there are certain modules, right? So concurrent users means how many users are logged into the application at a particular time period, right? So they may not be at the same scenario, or they may not be doing the same activity on the web page, but they are currently logged in, right? So that's your business perspective. From user's perspective, what is the performance testing means? That let's say I am the user of that application, so I have I want to buy something on Amazon.com. So how much is the response time for any request? So what does it mean? That whenever I am launching the application through any of my client, if my client could be a browser on my machine, it could be any other client, like on a tablet or on a smartphone. So whenever I'm accessing the application, and when I'm accessing and going through a key business scenarios, how much time it is taking to load, because that's one of the most important thing when you are creating an application. So if let's say I go to an application, I go to a web application, I'm trying to access a website, and it is taking too much of time, maybe more than 5 seconds or 10 seconds to load. Do you think I would ever go back to that particular application? I would find immediately I'm going to find Google and find out some alternative website which is providing me the same kind of functionality. I would never go back to that particular website. So from user point of view, response time for each HTTP request is the most important thing. Then from system view, what does system mean? So system means from technical perspective. So people who have created the application and who are responsible for maintaining the application. So from system view, how much you can say is the resource utilization. So what are the various resources? We have CPU, we have network, then we have memory, then we have disk IO. So these are the various resources you can say, and we need to monitor these resources, because eventually these system view or these resources are going to tell us what exactly going wrong and how can we actually improve the user's perspective and the business perspective, right? Now once you have so you, as the tester, you have to actually keep in mind all these three views, right? So you need to know how many concurrent users are going to access the application at a particular time, then how much the response time for each request is acceptable, and then you have to see and you can monitor, you have to monitor the resources, right? So you have to monitor this CPU, how much is, network access, how much is the bandwidth, how much memory is being taken, or are there any memory leaks, or how much is disk IO, is it too many? So depending upon how you depending upon like where are the bottlenecks, you might suggest your team to improvise on certain things. For example, let's say if you think that how would you monitor all these things? So how many concurrent users? You might be doing some baseline testing, right? So you would be doing baseline testing with certain group of users. So you would say you would start with let's say 100 users, then you will move on to 250, then you will increase it to 500, and maybe then depending upon like how many, what is the capacity of the application, you have to find the capacity also. So then you will move on to 1000. So starting from baseline testing, you would be performing load testing, and then you will move on to stress testing. So just a brief overview what baseline testing and load testing and stress testing means. So baseline testing means that when you are everything is working fine in the right kind of ideal kind of situation, let's say in normal working day, so where the load is not that high, so for 100 users, concurrent users I'm expecting, and for every 100 concurrent user I'm expecting the response time has to be within a certain limit, like it might be 2000 milliseconds or maybe 2500 milliseconds. So that's your baseline testing. So it's in normal condition, or you can say uh, non-peak hours. This is my response time, and with this set of users, right? Then once you are okay with baseline testing, you try to tune your test. Tuning means let's say you want to see what is your like, can you increase? So can if it's supporting 100 users at the same time, so can it support 250 users or 500 users with the same response time? So you would be increasing the load on the system to find what is the average response time in non-peak hours, right? Then once you keep on increasing the load, there could be a time, or you can say a point, where the system is not performing in the same way, right, as you used to perform earlier. So once you increase the load from 500 to 1000, all of a sudden your system breaks. So system breaks means there could be 500 series of errors, like your application may crash, or it becomes unresponsive. It's not giving you response. So that's the later part. You call it stress testing. Stress testing means finding the bottleneck, right? So how do you actually start writing and creating your test cases? So you will be as I've told you, you will start with baseline testing, and you will keep on increasing the load, and you will check the response time. And once this cycle is done, then you will fine tune your test. So we call it fine tuning. So let me summarize, like what are the various steps while doing performance testing. First thing, you need to know the number of concurrent users. Then you need to know key business scenarios. For testing. So when you are doing performance testing, let's say if it's in a shopping portal, so most of the time people would be spending in searching and browsing the various products, right? So that is one of key business scenario. They may not actually spend so much of time in some other activities, so they would be spending this on this particular module, and then they would be spending some important module is your payment module, right? So these are the various key business scenarios. So when you are testing your doing load testing, you have to define certain set, or you can say certain workflow on which you would be performing your testing. You will not test your application for all the functionalities. It's not a functional testing, it is performance testing. So your prerequisite for doing performance testing is your web application. So the web application should have passed functional testing, and it is at least 80% stable. So if your application is breaking a lot and it is functionally not stable, so there is no point going ahead with performance testing. So that is your prerequisite before you start any kind of performance testing, right? So coming back to the steps, the first thing is number of concurrent users. Then the key business scenarios for testing. So once you have key business scenarios, you have to do some assertions, right? So assertions means, as we know, that you have to compare it with the what is your minimum acceptable response time. So you might do some assertions on the response time or throughput or latency, right? Then you have to do some assertions, because unless and until you do your assertions, how would you compare the actual is expected? So let's say with 100 users, I want the average response time should be less than 2000 milliseconds, right? So this is my expected output, but my actual output might be something else. So you need to do certain assertions, right? So once you have done this, you have to then fine tune your test. Fine tune your test means you have to increase the load. Sometimes you have to increase the load, you have to increase the ramp up period, you might have to do some iterations. So you have to make sure that like with these kind of variations, what is the effect. So then you can suggest certain things. For example, you can suggest web caching. If there are too many get requests, so you can suggest this kind of things. So this is called tuning. So you can say post tuning suggestions. Then probably sometimes you have to, if you see there is a bottleneck at in the middleware, that's your application is not able to do, taking too much of system resources, your CPU is increasing, so you can vertically scale your application, vertically scale your app. That means increasing the CPU capacity or increasing the memory, right? Then probably sometimes you have to horizontally scale your application, in the sense like if a web server is not able to handle too many web requests, so you can horizontally scale. So you can please scale the web servers using load balancers, right? So what does that mean? Like load balancers, you must be knowing that one web server may not handle all the requests. So if let's say I'm logging into Gmail, so a million of users are using Gmail at the same time, so one server definitely is not able to handle all the requests. So load balancers are servers or machines which split the request to various web servers. So you have to horizontally scale your application and increase the number of, you can say, boxes to balance that load which is coming, right? So you need to horizontally scale the web servers. Then there could be a bottleneck on the database side, right? So on the back end also there could be a bottleneck. So you need to horizontally scale your database servers as well. So you need to, what does this mean? So let's say you have Oracle DB. So you might have to actually split your servers into read and write operations. So there could be some dedicated servers for keep some, you can say, keep some dedicated servers for read operation. So mostly you would say this read operation is more you can say used as compared to write operation. It depends on the application. Like so if we are more lots of select queries, that is read operation, right? So you can have some dedicated servers for read operations and some other servers for write operation. So this also gonna make things really faster. And your current, you can say, if you we talked about grid, right? So Oracle 11G, G stands for grid, and it really helps you split up your load into various machines. And for end user, it assumes that the load is coming, like the request has been processed by the same server. It is not processed by you don't realize as a user it is being splitted within different boxes. Right? So these are some suggestions that you can give your project manager or the product owner. And it really needs a little bit of experience and a few expertise in this particular thing. And so, as you have seen, there could be bottlenecks at any layer. So there could be bottleneck at client side. It could be on middleware. So middleware means your application server or your web server, or it could be at a database level, right? And in certain cases, like since we are using distributed applications means your application might be talking to some other applications which is outside your infrastructure, right? So let's say I'm using a Visa gateway or some other payment gateway, or maybe let's say I'm using some other web services which belong to some other organization. So there could be a bottleneck at that level also. So anything you can say any um, module residing in foreign infrastructure, right? So here you, as a tester, let's say a lot of times when you do web service testing, which are generally owned by you have third-party vendors, right? So as a performance tester, you have to find out where your bottleneck lies. Like it might not be your application, it might be their application. The time it is taking to process your request and give you the response. So you have to find it out, and then you have to escalate the issue to your project manager, so that the owner of the application, he or like whoever is the owner of the application of that web service, he follows those SLA agreements. So in SLA, like service level agreement, these kind of things are written, like how many users that how many concurrent users that web service will support, and what is the minimum time response time the application is expected to give on peak hours and non-peak hours, right? So you have to escalate the issue and talk about these things in your Scrum meetings, that this is not something related to our infrastructure, this is something outside, and we have to actually review that SLA agreement, right? Apart from these things, actually there could be some other bottlenecks also. There could be some network issues as well. So for network issues, you can suggest to increase the bandwidth of the network. So also you have to keep this is an actually very important thing when you are doing performance testing. You have to ensure that on the system on which you are doing the performance testing, that's a high capacity system. That means it should have a powerful CPU, and it should have a good amount of memory and good hard disk, so that whenever you are creating multiple user environments, so you are let's say you are simulating 1,000 users. So your machine is sending 1,000 requests. So it should be able to handle those or run those concurrent threads or processes to send those requests. Otherwise, you are not testing the actual application. The bottleneck lies at your end only, right? So that is not true testing. So that is the reason the injectors, or you say the system that sends load to the application should be high capacity systems. So sometimes, a lot of times when you are running JMeter, so JMeter is a true multi-threading application which runs, creates multiple users and runs different threads. So all the threads are running in your environment, and they are using your CPU and your machine CPU and your machine's memory. So a lot of time happens when you are increasing the load beyond a certain limit, your JMeter hangs, because your machine is not able to handle everything, because it is running in JVM. JVM is Java Virtual Machine, so it is limited by the capacity of the Java Virtual Machine on your system, right? So you might have to split your test on different machines. So there is, using JMeter, you can actually we can test and inject remotely also. So what it means, if you see here, there is a remote, there should be a remote server also. If you see, we have a JMeter server application. So JMeter server is basically the same application which runs on remote machine. So you are sending the request from your machine to run the test on a different machine, which might be a high capacity machine. So this is JMeter. It's basically an open source, so it doesn't have a too flashy GUI, but when you must have heard of load runner. Load runner is a tool from HP to perform the same kind of task. So it also performs uh, it injects the load on different machines, and it is actually the whole architecture of load runner is it's pretty intense. They have their, you can actually control from one machine. You can have separate injectors for the same application. You can install profilers at every tier of the application. So that is a commercial tool, and definitely it is pricey. So that's the reason people are actually moving to JMeter for their applications rather than working with the load runner. And load runner, you can write the scripts, you can manipulate your scripts using C. JMeter also, although this is a GUI, but you can do GUI-less testing also. So as I've told you, JMeter is nothing, it's basically a Java application. So you can actually integrate and create your own scripts in Java and run JMeter through Java. So a lot of developers, they actually integrate JMeter in their Java coding environment and then run their performance testing from there. Any questions? Any questions from anyone? Yes, Meera. With load runner, we can definitely test remotely. As I have told you, load runner, there are separate injectors. There are controller. There is a controller, and then there are the actual machines where the application is hosted, right? So what does injectors mean? Injectors are the machines from where you send the load, right? So you write your scripts on injectors. You run your scripts from injectors. Script is run on injectors. Controller is a machine from where you control your test scripts. So you can actually remotely you can send the request to a machine. You can run your test cases on a machine, and then you can actually analyze the data through it. So controller is, as the name suggests, is the master machine which controls the whole architecture. And then there are certain analyzers also, so you can run analyzers on separate machines. So that is load runner, but here right now we are talking about JMeter, and definitely you can actually go through a load runner recordings to get a good overview. Then the another question has been asked is SLA agreement will be part of company document. Whenever we are let's say I'm creating an application, and whenever I want to buy a third party service, there is a certain kind of agreement, or there are certain documents which are exchanged. Those are called service level agreement, right? So the SLA documents, and these SLAs are actually used by testers and BAs to actually write your test cases, because as I have told you, in SLAs it would be written how many concurrent users that particular application would be supporting, and how much is the response time that is expected. So if it does not follow, or it does not agree to that SLA, then definitely you can actually go back, and you can escalate the issue, and then things would be better, right? So coming back to this steps, so as I have told you that the first step we should know is how many users, the number of concurrent users would be accessing the application. So you would be creating a matrix like this. So you will be creating your test case document, and a lot of time it happens when you are companies which are using JMeter, you might not be given the response time. So first time, let's say you are testing the application, so nobody knows that how much response time is there. So you would be actually creating a table, and you would be noting down your observations in that table. So you would be writing something like users and environment, and then you can say expected response, and any kind of remarks, and this is the actual response. So you can start with 1 to 100 users, then you can from 100 to 250, then you can say from 250 to 500, and so on and so forth, depending upon this. Actually you need to this must be written somewhere in your BRD or some specifications requirements. Then in environment you would be writing like the OS or the web servers you would be testing. So it was done on Windows. So you're what you are saying that you ran your script on Windows, and but the script was using you can say Apache Tomcat web server. So the container is Tomcat, and the backend is, you can say, MySQL or Oracle, whatever. And then you have to find write the expected response. So, and then probably this you have to also test for which scenario. So I need to actually add one more column. So you would write the business scenario that you tested, right? So this could be registration, right? And then the same thing could be repeated for some other business scenario. Okay, so maybe you there could be one scenario or 5 scenarios. You have to actually create a matrix for different business scenarios and then note the expected response and the actual response, right? So as I've told you, like first step is how many concurrent users are there. So if you see this application, so let's start my JMeter. So here it's a very simple GUI. If you see, there are two things here: test plan and workbench. So you will be writing your test cases in test plan. So you say add threads, and you need to create the thread group. So what does thread group means? Thread group means how many concurrent users you are expecting. So this is what this column 1 to 100, right? Then 100 to 250 or 250 to 500. So this is your thread group, and you can actually give a nice name. So you can say Google users, and you can put some description here. So let's say I want to test it for 10 concurrent users. Then what is ramp up period? So ramp up period means how much time would be there for starting every thread. For example, let's say I keep the ramp up time as 1 second. So within 1 second, all the threads would be up and running, right? So when you are sending the load, what is the technique to send the load? So there are different techniques. So they could be burst, there could be spike, there could be, uh, um, there could be some median kind of thing. So ramp up period means the technique you are creating the load. So if I keep it as 1, that means within 1 second all the threads should be up and running. If I write here 20, so 20 divided by 10, that's 2 seconds. So every other second my one thread would be running. So within 20 seconds all the threads has to be up and running. If I make it 5, then how much time duration would be there between starting of each thread? Yeah, so how much time? Definitely if I want 10 threads to be up and running in 5 seconds, so the ramp up, the time duration between every thread has to be half second, right? It has to be 0.5 second. So you can easily calculate how much ramp period you want. So generally what happens, you should, when you are starting the test, so you need to keep the ramp up period. It's a good practice to keep the ramp up period as the same number as number of users. So I would say a ramp up period as 10, right? Then what happens, we have a loop count. Loop count means how many iterations each thread would be taking. So every thread is a user. So I can actually through JMeter, the same user can actually send more than one request also, right? So one thread or one process can be used to send multiple iterations for the same request. So we need to, if I say forever means it will keep on giving the request until a certain time period, or I can give a thread count, loop count as 2. So there would be, for every users there would be 2 requests. So in total there would be 20 requests, right? Then it also depends on the number of requests, in the sense like, let's say I want to test this particular website, JMeter Apache. So first I will go to home page. Let's say this is my home page, and then I can I'm clicking on this particular link. So there are 2 web requests, first for the home page and second for this particular link. So my total number of requests is in one test plan is number of users multiply by number of iterations multiply by number of requests. So this here I am talking about number of HTTP requests. So if it is, there are 2 pages and there are 5, here in our case there are 10 users, and each user is giving 2 iterations, and let's say there are 2 HTTP requests I am sending, so there would be in total 40 requests. So let's try to create this kind of scenario. So here I'm trying to give Google as the request, and some few things, there are certain other things also. You can actually add a scheduler here. Scheduler means you can instruct JMeter to start this testing or to run these threads at a particular time. So your start time would be this, your end time would be this. So right now the start time is my current system time, and I can choose my end time. So the test would keep on running, and this would be, you can say, overridden. So here there would be only 40 requests, but if I put an end time, the request will keep on looping until this particular time. Then there is something called duration. So duration means, let's say I don't want to run all the test, I just want to run the test for 5 seconds. So this is gonna override everything. So only 5 seconds, no matter how many requests have been sent, the test is gonna stop after 5 seconds. Okay. Then if you are writing duration, you can say startup delay. So startup delay means, again, how much delay you want to give between each thread. So that also you can give here, right? Then there are 2 things to stop the test. Like, let's say your tests are running and they haven't completed this particular number, and you want to stop the test in middle. So there are 2 things here. There is a stop and there is a shutdown. So stop means that's immediately you need to stop the test. So it is gonna kill all the process immediately, and your test would stop. Shutdown means shutdown is definitely a recommended way. Shutdown is gonna clean up the resources, and there is a process. It will end all the threads nicely, and it would clean up the resources, and it would, so that that memory is reusable. So shutdown is definitely a better approach, but in case you want to immediately stop, you can use stop to run your test. So once your thread group is created, you need to add certain other things. So before starting that, we have let me just tell you what all these things mean. So we have controllers. So main important thing in in JMeter testing, so we have to find, there are certain things called samplers, then we have controllers, we have listeners. Then apart from these, we have, you can enhance your scripts. You have timers, then you have some preprocessors, and then you have some post processors. So what does sampler mean? Sampler means you are creating samples. Samples means that you are creating the request, the actual request. So JMeter can be used to test, to send requests to any client server application. So you are sending wherever your test is running is your client, and the server could be anything. It could be a web application, it could be an FTP server, it could be LDAP server, or it could be, you can say, it can be a SOAP web service, right? It could be a database testing. So you can do actually load testing on database using JMeter. So these are certain common things which you can actually send. So these are the different kind of requests you would be sending. So if you're testing the performance of a web application, then you have to create a web app sampler, or in other terms which we call it HTTP sampler, right? So these are actually, this is the most important, you can say, very common interview questions. What which different kind of samplers have you used in JMeter, so you can talk about these. Then what are controllers? So controllers are used to enhance your script. So you have a one-time controller, you have logical controllers in the sense like if you want to do some iterations on a certain thing, or there is a recording controller, there is a simple controller. So we'll it is just basically you can say a utility to enhance the script. Then when you are writing your test cases, you need to note down the, or you can say you need to see the results. So listeners are used to you can say log in the results, right? So we have different types of listeners. So it can be in a form of graph, it can be in a form of table, it can be in a form of tree. So we have different types of, we have trees, graphs, tables. So in this form we can actually note down the or log in the results of our request. Then there are something called timers. So timers are so if you can actually, there is always some kind of, you can add certain kind of delay. So you can add a constant timer, you can add a random timer. So delay between various requests. So if between various threads, if you want to put some delay, you don't want to run all the threads at the same time, or some in scenarios, let's say there are two HTTP requests, between two HTTP requests you want to add a delay. So timers are used to add delays between requests. Then there is something called preprocessors and post-processors. So preprocessor means, so if you want to do any kind of configuration or before the tests are run. So any configuration before test runs. And post-processor means any kind of you can say if you want to extract something from the response, so any kind of, you can say not configuration, I would say any kind of information extracted after the tests are run. So those are post processors, right? So we'll go through all these, and although there are lots of options, so we'll go through some which are very popular. So once you have created the thread group, you need to add a sampler. So we will say add a sampler. So as you see, there are so many samplers. You can actually as I have told you, you can actually put load test on some Java code. So there is a Java request also. You can use FTP request. JDBC request is Java database connectivity. So you can access database through it. You can run your JUnit test cases, LDAP, SMTP, web service SOAP request. So these kind of you can say request you can create, right? So let's say I want regular web application, I want to do performance testing. I would say HTTP request. Then I do need to give the web server. So let's say I want to send request to google.com, right? So by default the port at which the requests are sent is 80, and you can actually give a timeout for the connection. So let's say you don't want to send the request after 1000 milliseconds or 1 second. So you can give the connection timeout and then you can use the method. Basically these are the APIs which are used to send the request. So by default it is HTTP client 4. So you can use it, select it from the drop down, or otherwise it's automatically selected. And then you have to give the kind of method you want to send the request. So if it's a get method or post, head, options, so these are the methods. Then if let's say there are certain parameters which are sent with the request, So let's say you want to test for YA and you want to test for login request, right? So these are the parameters you would be sending with the request. So you can add some parameters here. So right now let's do google.com and then we'll do parameterization as well. Okay, so we have added one sampler. Now we need to add a listener. So you can actually give requests, let's say main or you say Google home page. Then we need to add a listener. So if you see here, listeners are you can say utilities through which you can view the results. So you can create a graph, a report, you can create some mailer visualizer, response time graph you can create. You can create a spline visualizer, you can create a tree or a table. It depends what kind of listener you want, and you can add actually more than one listener. So let's add one. We are adding a aggregate report, and then we can add say some spline visualizer, and then so in general you should not add more than one listener, because adding the results to the listeners takes lots of resources. So it's better to keep the listener very minimal, like maybe just one listener, and avoid using results trees. But for class demonstration, I just wanted you to show how what is the response and what for this particular request. That's the reason I'm adding this result tree. You can actually drag and drop and you can just organize these requests. So these are actually basic things which you need, but you can enhance this script by adding certain other things. So let's try to run this. So if you see here, I have created a 10 threads, and ramp up period is this. The loop count is 2. I don't want to schedule right now. And there are certain things like what you want to continue. Let's say there is some error happens, like there could be some assertion error or some other kind of error. So what do you want to do? You want to start the next loop, you want to stop the thread, or you want to stop the test, or immediately you want to stop the test. So what you want to do? So generally what we do continue. So we don't want to stop the test, you want to continue running till all the requests have been sent. So now you can actually use this green button to start the request, and before starting this you can actually check the log viewer. So whatever is happening, that would be logged here in this particular window, and then I can send this start the request. It says you need to save the file. All the JMX or you say JMeter projects are saved as a .jmx file. It is basically an XML file, and let me save it. And if you see here, we have started. It is giving automatically some name. So how many requests it would send? So this is 10 into 2, 20 requests should be there. You can see the result tree. So let's try to see the tree here. This is your sampler result. So which gives you, this is one of the first thread and second iteration, and it started at this particular time, and this is the latency. Latency, what does latency means, and how is it different from response time? Yeah, so there is actually, when you are sending the request, so let's say I'm sending the request from client to server, so the time which is taken between the sending and the time at which the server has received the request. That is called the latency period. So generally when we are doing the performance testing, most of the applications, they really don't bother about the latency time, because latency time depends on a lot of things. So it depends on, you know, my system capacity, the kind of connection I'm having, the kind of bandwidth I'm using. So generally people are not bothered about the latency time. What they are bothered is response time. Response time is the time which is taken by the application to process the request. So that here if you see in JMeter or any other performance testing tool, so what we are actually looking is response time, right? So latency is the time to the request to be received by the server, and response is the time taken by the server to process the request, right? But you may, some applications, there could be requirement that you might have to test the application for latency also, especially when you are doing performance testing for from mobile devices. So their latency is very important, right? So you have to test according to various carriers, various data plans. So latency actually becomes important, right? Then we have, it also tells you what kind of request that you have sent. Are there any headers? So there are host, user. You can see in this format also what is your user agent. So I'm using the HTTP client 4 API. And then the host is google.com, and there could be some other request also. If there are any parameters, that also would be sent. So as I've told you that the default port for HTTP request is port 80, and this is your response data. This is in a text format. Actually you can change the format to HTML. So let's say this is the HTML that you would be looking here, or it could be, you can see it as XML format also. So it gives you a nice tree kind of a structure, and you can see the tags in this form, right? So you can see the title, the script and everything, all these kind of things you can see. Okay. And green means that the test has passed. Anyway, we haven't done any assertion, so my test is not passed. I am just doing smoke testing. So smoke testing means just to ensure that your application is up and running, so that you can perform subsequent tests, right? So I need to make certain kind of assertion. If you see here, I can say add assertions. So you can do the assertions, various different kind of assertions. The most popular one is duration, response assertion, and size assertion. So what does duration means? Duration means the whatever response you are getting, that you should receive it in a particular time. So this is the most important assertion you would be doing on all your requests. So it has to be part of all your requests. So let's say I want the duration in it has to be within 2500, right? So let's add another assertion. So you can add response assertion. Response assertion is an assertion which is on the response data. So if you see here, this is my response data. So if, let's say I want to do check whether the it contains certain text, right? So let's say this business solution is a text. I want to see that the response data contains this text. So you can see here, you can check for text response, you can check for response code. So you can add, say, response code should be 200, because 200 is basically the response for request that has been accepted by the user and the response has been sent. So you can add this request, and here the pattern needs to be in the form of a regular expression. That is the reason I am giving something like this. And you can do some other assertions, like on the text also you can do assertions. So let me create one more assertion on the text response. and let's say right, so I'm doing response assertion. Then I can add assertion on the size. So if you see here, the size of the response data, so there is always some size, right? So there is size of the uh, response data. So let's say it has to be less than or something, you can say greater than a certain number of bytes. So let's say I can add here, if you size in bytes, let's say it has to be greater than uh, 50,000 bytes. I think that would be too much. Let's say it should be greater than 2000 bytes. Okay, and you can actually add the size for the response header, response body, response code, so whatever you feel like. So generally people do it on the full response or the response body, you can say. So these are the assertions. So once we have set the assertions, we need to run the test. To now we'll ensure that the test has been run. If it is green, it is run. If it is red, that means it is the test hasn't been passed. So now I'm starting the assertions here. Test, again it is going green. Green means the test has been passed. All the assertions have been passed. And if you want, you can actually clear the log. So you can say clear log, and let me make it 1000 milliseconds, and let's see how many tests are failed. Now let me run the test again. Now also all my requests test have been passed. That means my response time for every request is less than 1000 milliseconds. So if you see here, you have the body size, you have the header size, and you have the total size. And this is your latency time. You can add see other reports also. So this is your aggregate report, and it is also on response time. And if you see here, there are 20 total samples. Why 20 samples were there? Because we created 10 into 2 multiplied by 1 request. So there were 20 samples. This is average response time, median 90%, minimum response time was this. Is there any error, and what is the throughput? And you can actually save it into a file. So if I give the name of a certain text file, so you can save it here, and you can configure what things needs to be saved. You can save it in XML also. So let's say I want to save it somewhere here. So you can write here Google clear the test, and then you can rerun this. So you can see the changes which are coming here. So this is an XML file which you can open it in browser. So if you see here, these are your test results. You can choose what information you want in the response. This is the sample, this is the latency, this is the time, this is the request, name of the request, this is the response code, response message, and this is the thread count, thread number, and there are other some things which you can actually configure. And it says duration assertion, there were no failures and no errors. That's the reason they are it is false. A response assertion, so there were two response assertions, there was one size assertion. So for each sample it's gonna create, so if it should have since we had 20 samples, so there would be 20 elements, right? And you can actually configure what needs to be added here. So we have response message, we have label, success, byte count, thread name, data type, latency, elapsed time. So everything is there. You can actually save URL and other things also, idle time, etc. Then you have a spline visualizer, which actually gives you a graph kind of thing. There are certain other graphs, aggregate graphs, and if you see, there are certain other listeners as well. You have aggregate graphs and you have response time graph. This also can be added. And then you can save the graph. And you can actually modify, make some modifications in X and Y axis. So this also can be added. So let's try to enhance this test plan. So here I have given just one request, right? So there could be multiple requests. So you can actually create another thread group here. So let me pick some other application. So let's say whiteboxqa.com, right? So when my request is whiteboxqa.com, and then I have to click on login. So my you can say the main server in which I am gonna hit is whiteboxqa.com, and then probably I have to give certain other HTTP requests like login.php or register or something like that. So what I can do, instead of writing the the request server again and again, I can create a config element. So what I can do first, so let's create a config element, and I would say HTTP request default. So here I can say server IP is www.whiteboxqa.com, and just make sure that you do not add HTTP because it's already an HTTP request, so HTTP is already added there, right? Now I want to configure this thread group. So let's say I want to do it at 5 and 5. The reason I'm using less number of users because my machine is not capable enough to handle so many concurrent users, and it might crash because GoToMeeting also takes lots of resources of my machine, right? So I want to give, let's say, 2 iterations per user. Now I want to add the sampler. So what I'll say add HTTP request sampler. Here I don't have to give a web server because I've already included it in HTTP request default, and I would say path as root, and now let's add one listener. Okay, and I can run this now and give this thread group some name, say WBQA users. And let me disable this thread group for a while and start running this. So I want to clean up, so say clear all and run this. Okay, so here if you see there are how many 5 into 2 10 requests have been there. So 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 9 10. Then you can add certain assertions. So here you can say add and say assertion, duration assertion, so it has to be within 1000 milliseconds. Then let me add some more request. So I do not want only to go to the home page, I want to go to login page as well. So it is login.php, right? So what I'll go do, I'll add another request here. So I would say add another sampler, HTTP request, and here in path I would say login.php. Okay, and here I would say login page. Now how many requests would be there? So there are 2 requests. So the first one is home page and the second one is login page, right? So let's run this again. So here now there are 20 requests, home, login. I haven't done any assertions, so you can actually add assertions here also. So it you can do say duration again, right? And you can move this to after. Now let's say after this click, right, what it is, which request it has been sent. So if you see the page source, the method is the request which has been sent is vauthenticate.php, right? And here two input types, like we have a login and then this is the button. Actually there should be 2 input boxes. Yeah, so first is username and the other one is should be password, right? So there are 2 parameters which are sent with vauthenticate.php. So next request I want to send it by vauthenticate.php. So I'll create another request. So say I would say add HTTP request and I would say authenticate. And here I would be adding some parameters. So here I would say username and I can give some value here. And the other one is password. Right, so these are 2 parameters that would be sent with this particular request. And here you can actually add some assertions again. Here, let's say I want to, I'm giving an invalid password. So let's say here I'm giving some invalid password, and the response I would say I'm expecting this to be my next page. So I would say patterns to be added here. Right, and this is on the text response. Now let's try to run this. So we have two assertions, three assertions, and we have three requests. So let me just make it 3 so it's easily understood. And I'm running this. So let me run it again because I need to view the results of all the requests. So I need to actually put into this tree. So I need to put the listener under the main tree to get the results for all the requests, and then I'll run this again. So we have home, and then we have login, and we have authenticate. Here we see it should give me this kind of thing. So where it is, what is the response data? Yeah, so here I think the response is not coming fine. So sometimes what happens in this case, not coming fine, there might be some other you can say requests that have been sent which we don't know. So in this kind of scenario, it's better to do recording of the scenario and then proceed and do assertions. So for doing that, we need to actually create a recording controller. So what I'll do, so let's say I'll add a recording controller. So in you will say recording controller, and then after this we need to do some proxy settings. So what I want, I want to record the steps that I am taking on the web page, right? So I need to configure my browser. So let's say I want to record on Firefox. So I have to run the Firefox and set it up. See, so I'll go to tools and tools options. Then you can go to advanced, network settings, and say manual proxy settings. And you can here I'm giving the port 8081, and you can write here the HTTP proxy as local host and press OK. And press OK. So I need to write the same proxy here. So what I'll do, I'll add a proxy. I would say add non-test element HTTP proxy server, and here I would change the port to 8081, and the target control is the recording controller as I have added. So all the steps would be added here, and then you have to start this proxy. So you would say start, and here I would say proxy up and running. So now what happens? Now let's go to whiteboxqa.com. go to login and let's type in something and say login. Right now go back and say stop. Now if you see, just expand recording controller and you will see all these queries, right? All these HTTP requests, I would say. So we have this root, then we have some CSS which is being called, and then we have login.php, and then we have we authenticate, and here we have the username, test, and login. There are actually 3 parameters here, so that's the reason it was not working fine. So we need to actually pass 3 parameters, and then fail.php was called. So we need to we can exclude this CSS, so we can just say delete, and then this JS request also I can remove. Right, so there would be actually 4 requests now. So we have this home page, so let's name to home page. Then we have a login.php, so you say login page. Then we have authenticate, so authenticate, and then you have failed page, login failed page. Right, and in authenticate there are some username and password and login. Now let us run this. We can actually add assertions. So here every page you can add some assertions. So let's say I want to, here I'm adding assertion on the response code. So the response code should be 200. So you need to add actually response code assertion for all the requests. So that's also important. And then again duration assertion is important for every request. Say 800 milliseconds. Then for login page again you can add assertions. Say add assertions response assertion. For login page, let's do a text response. Then I log in. So this is the text I'm looking for. So it is actually doing functional testing as well. So I'm doing text response and then authenticate. So we have 3. So when I'm calling authenticate, so here I can just say the response because there is no HTTP request, like some web page is not coming up, so I just put a duration, say 800, and on login again I can add some response assertion. Here I'm looking for this particular text. Your login is not valid. Right, now let's clear all, and if you want I can actually delete all these. Say remove and add the listener. Okay, and run the test. So we have 3 into 2 6, and we have 1 2 3 4. So there would be 6 into 4 24 HTTP request. So let's start this. Oh, all of them are failing. Okay, the reason it is failing, I think it is trying to, we need to stop the proxy. I think I have stopped the proxy. Yeah. Assertion the test failed, code expected. Why it is not getting? Click on any page and see whether it is sending the request or not. So the request is not being sent in a proper way. So let's see why it is not being sent in a proper way. Okay, let me just remove the proxy. Clear the log. Okay, and then we have to actually give the default. So the reason it is not giving, because I removed the default HTTP request default. So here I would say www.whiteboxqa.com. And you need to add this before this. So first this would be HTTP request default, and then there would be home page, and so on and so forth. So let's try to run this again. Now if you see, all my assertions are passing. So home, login, authenticate, then login failed page. So here this is the request I'm sending, and this is the response data. For login again, login.php. For authenticate, I'm sending this username and password, and login is equal to login. So these are 3 parameters which I'm testing. Now you must be wondering, like all the request here I'm testing through this username and password. So what's the use of doing the 1,000 users will not be, let's say you are doing 1,000 testing on 1,000 users, they won't be logging at with the same email ID, right? So there would be different email IDs. So you have to provide different sets of parameters for this. So to achieve this kind of data driven testing, because we need to send the request with different set of parameters, what we need to do, we have to actually add another config element which is called CSV data config. So here you can actually mention the file from which it is going to take the parameters. So let's try to create a file, and it has to be a CSV file. So let's create a CSV file. I would say new text document, and wbqa.csv. So let me just first make changes, and then I'll rename it. And so we have username, so let's say so I'm giving invalid values. some test at test.com, test3. So I'm giving 3 values, and let me save this as wbqa.csv and press save. Copy the path, go back to JMeter, and in file name just give the name of the file, so wbqa.csv, and then you have to give the variable names. So give, let's say I say user and pwd as the password. Delimiter is this, and everything else is fine. So now I need to use this user and password in my test. So here go back to authenticate, and here instead of values just remove this, and here you can give $, curly braces, user, for password $, curly braces, pwd. These are the same names which I have given in CSV dataset config. And if you want, you can actually move this here. Okay, and then if you want to encode, press on encode. So this is gonna do the URL encoding for these username and password, right? So login is actually same for all the requests, so I'm not changing login. So now let's try to run this. Let me first clear the log and then run it again. So now if you see here, the first one was shilpi@gmail.com and the password was test1. Second was sampath@gmail.com and password test2. Third one was test.com, and then it actually repeated. Then after this request, if you see here, again it is repeated, right? So everything is repeated. So you can actually, if there are 1,000 users, you don't have to give 1,000 email IDs. Probably you can give 50 email IDs or 20 email IDs, and then it's going to repeat for every sample, right? So this way you can parameterize your test cases or test plans, I would say. Okay. Another thing is, like, while recording, so going back to HTTP proxy reader, one thing I actually forgot to mention. While recording, there could be some other like JS, PNG. There are certain image files. Sometimes they get downloaded. So to avoid those, you can actually select some patterns to exclude. Say, let's say I don't want .js files to be included in my test request samplers, right? So I can say dot asterisk backslash dot js, and so this is added. You can actually add any. So let's say I don't want to add dot png files, right? So these are the patterns. So while you are recording, these patterns would be excluded. Similarly, if you want to just let's say just include .php files, so you can actually say the same thing, the same pattern with the .php as ending. So that also you can do, right? So these are some post tuning suggestions. So if the get requests are taking longer time as post requests, so you can say web caching. We should enable web caching, like we should cache get requests so that the response is much faster, right? Also you can make some other suggestions, like you can make the pages which are frequently accessed, they should be we can make 80% of 90% of that static page, so that it does not connect to database server, right?
Okay.
So these kind of things you have to mention. That's the reason you have to give response for every request, because each request is of different type. So this is a get request. We authenticate, this is a post request, right? With three
Oh, okay.
parameters. So we cannot have the same assertions on everything.
Okay.
Okay. So if you remember, when we created the chart, right? For chart, I mentioned the business scenario. Which business scenario? Registration page. I'm talking about registration page, right?
Okay.
So
Okay.
so what you might have to do one thing, like let's say you add. Let me add here another listener. Response aggregate report, and let me run this again. So if you see the aggregate report, even it creates different samples and give the average for each sample. If you see here, the average for home page is actually more as compared to other pages, right? So we
Right.
have to see, like, this request is taking more time. So we need to notify this and bring it to the issue that home page is loading. It's taking so much of time, so we have to work on this, make it cacheable, or make more uh, page static, right? Find out whether is there anything related to the application. So for every tier there is a way to to test. So load runner or JMeter, it's gonna tell you the response time, the whole response time. The response time means the time which has been taken to process the request, right? So to process
Yes.
the request, there would be an application involved, like maybe there are .php files. There could be a couple of database requests. So lots of things are happening. There could be some web services. Then at each tier, like at each of these components, where the actual bottleneck lies. So before doing performance testing on the system, a lot of companies, they do component performance testing for each component, so that, let's say, you will be doing the performance testing on the queries that have been created by the developers, to ensure that is the bottleneck on the database level. Then there would be let's say on client side, you can check for the network bandwidth. So you will be using some network profilers. So for middleware, you would be using, so if you it's a Java application, maybe you can use JProfile and some other check for memory leaks and web server profilers. Those kind of things you can check. For database level, you have to do some kind of query optimization. So backend testing you are doing, right? So you have to optimize the query. So that's the reason we in a company generally the same QA tester would be doing all these kind of individual testing as well as the system testing, right? So because here when we test the performance of the components individually, we exactly know how things are failing, rather than, it's JMeter gives you the complete picture. It doesn't tell you, let's say this it is taking 148 milliseconds to give that's the average response time, but I don't know what is the uh, division where it is taking time. Is it taking time to access the database, or is it my net because of my network bandwidth? So I have to test each and everything separately. So um, now it depends on you how you want to approach this problem, right? So you
Okay,
have
so here in this report, it means like 62. So login page average response time is 62. So login page is loading faster than the home page, right?
yeah
after the home page loads,
Yeah.
the login page is faster.
Yes. So so the reason is like generally home pages are get requests, it should run faster, it should be faster. So you can actually report this to Sampath that your website home page is response time is slow, it has to run faster. What happens like mm, the subsequent pages are running faster sometimes it because they are cached. So once you go to a website, you visit certain pages a lot number times, so those are cached in your local history, so that is the
Yeah.
reason they become faster.
Okay.
Okay, so you can cache it in definitely you can they are cacheable in your local history also, or they are sometimes cacheable in the intermediaries nodes, right? So let's say I'm trying to connect to Google server or Wikipedia. So Wikipedia pages are generally static, right? So they are not, when you are not doing any updations or you're not posting any query. So do you think everybody would be connecting to one server? Definitely those requests are cacheable unless and until the request is not sent to the server, unless and until there is any change in the that page, right?
Yes.
So this
So
actually
for
comes with a little bit of experience. Like if it is taking time, then how would you do the follow up?
okay.
So the best place to learn here. So we have actually good tutorials online. So again, the best place is to learn is Apache JMeter. You can use the user manual. There is a component reference page. So each and every request, it is a detailed, you can say, documentation of every request. So here you can go say HTTP request and they'll tell you what to do and what not and what does it mean, right? And here you will find the controllers, various controllers. So let me just go through a couple of them. So we have simple controller. So it's simple controller is nothing. It's basically a placeholder. Let's say you want to combine couple of requests into one group, then you can create a simple controller. Then loop controller is, as the name suggests, if you want to repeat a particular request n number of times. So let's say here I want to repeat this login page 5 times, then I would create a loop controller here. Then we have once only controller. So what happens is once you are logged into a page to a website, then you want to repeat certain steps. So you just want to run the thread for the login page just once and then you want to repeat. So you can use once only controller. For example, for home page you want once only, so that would be a part. This request sampler would be part of child of once only controller, and rest would be the child of the root thread group, right? So it's gonna the run this particular page just once and the others would be repeated for each thread. So if you have, there are 5 threads running, so this home page would be executed 5 times, but if there are 10 iterations or 20 iterations, then also it will run only 5 times, it will not repeat. The rest of them would be repeated according to the iterations, but once only controller will iterate once per thread. Then we have interleave controller. So interleave means if you want to choose so let's say you want to first time you want to run, you want to choose a news page and log page and then fact page. So you are actually picking one of these for every request cycle. So this is the how a JMeter would run. So it will run news page and then log page, then fact page and then log page and then gum page, then log page. Then again it is going to repeat the cycle if for a number of requests that have been there. Then we have some random controller. This is again a loop controller for each. Recording controller, as I have told you, which It helps in recording. So these are the basic controllers. Then you have certain type of listeners. Then we have CSV dataset config configuration element we have seen. If you want to manage certain cookies, then there is a cookie manager, like you want to set certain cookies, you want to read the cookies, then you can use cookie manager. And you can set your some variables also. For example, here instead of reading from let's say a config file, you want to set keep the data in this test only, then you can use user defined variables. Although reading from a test CSV file is definitely a better approach. Also, user defined variables can also be used for storing some test specific things. For example, I want to store this whiteboxqa.com into some variable, so I can create a user defined user config element. So there would be user defined variables, and I can add say web URL, and I can give name as say www.whiteboxqa.com. So after this, I can actually use this web URL anywhere. So here I can say, instead of this, I can write $web URL. So whenever it is running, it's going to replace this with the user defined variable. Okay. Then I want to show you some pre-processors and post-processors. One of the most important preprocessor which you might be using is URL rewriting modifier. So what does it mean? Here what happens when you log into Whitebox QA, it is basically using the login credential, just storing in the cookies and then passing that information from one page to another, right? So this is the session, or you can say the we are making this stateful. We are making the request, these HTTP requests at stateful by giving parameters, right? So we are using cookies to manage this. Sometimes instead of cookies, you are creating session IDs. So a lot of times, like let's say log into Gmail, there are some session IDs which are created. So when these session IDs are created, you have to actually, for every request, you have to pass the session ID in subsequent request. For that, you need to create a preprocessor. This is a preprocessor URL rewriting, and then you give the name of the parameter which is used as session argument. So what happens whenever you would be sending a subsequent request, this session ID would be passed in every request that follows. So this is actually very useful when instead of parameters, session ID is used to do session management. Then we have user parameters that I have already shown you. JDBC preprocessor is also used a lot of times when you want to just do a smoke testing. In the sense, you would just want to create a JDBC connection and find whether it is running or not. So callable statement means statement which is where you want to run a particular stored procedure or trigger, their callable statement. We'll go through it, how to do database testing, performance testing of database. Then we have some post processors. So post processors are generally used when you want to extract some information from the response data. For example, let's say Mm, on login page, this is your response data. So let me put it into an XML format. Let's say this is your title, right? So this is title is too long, but anyway, you want to extract this title or this information and you want to use it in subsequent request, or you want to just say paste it somewhere, or in subsequent request you want to pass this as a parameter in subsequent request. So you want to extract this information, right? And so what you can do, you can use a post processor. So let me add a post processor here, and I would say XPath extractor. So let me give this as title, name of this result. It would be stored in title, and XPath query as HTML head title, and default value is say not found. And then I can use, let's say this, I am using it after this, and then in a login page I want to use this somewhere. So let me use an authenticate. Let me add another parameter. So this title, it would be extracted from this and it would be passed into this request. So you might get some assertion failures. Let me clear the log. Okay, and let's run this. Okay, so this it says it is not found. It is somehow not extracting the title from this XPath query HTML head title home page. It's not extracting it, so it is giving the default value. Say use tidy. So I'm just using the parser. Let me clear it all. Yeah, if you see here, now the test has whatever the information that we extracted from the home page has been passed as the parameter to the next request. So this is a post processor which is passing the taking the input from a previous request and passing it to the next request. So this is one of the examples. So you can relate your subsequent request by extracting the information like this. So this is one of the post processors. So when you talk about JMeter in your interviews, you have to talk about certain things. So you will be talking about samplers. So you will say we have used a web application sampler or HTTP samplers. You may also mention SOAP and database. I would show you how to do performance testing on database. SOAP, since you are still haven't started with SOAP UI, so I will not show you SOAP. But once you can go through my previous recording and see how we do performance testing on SOAP web services. Then you will talk about controllers. So you will talk about random controller or once only controller. then recording controller or simple controller. Then listeners, so we will talk about aggregate graph, aggregate report, summary report, spline visualizer. So these are the certain listeners. Then preprocessors, and then post processor. You can say we used XPath extractor. You can actually use regular expressions also as a way to extract the information. So you have regular expression extractor, XPath extractor, you have JDBC post processor. So now let's create a sampler, or you can say a thread group, which test your JDBC connection. So for that, let's create another thread group. So here say add thread group. So how many connections you want to say? Let's say 5 here, and the ramp up period is again 5, and say HR user. So I would be connecting to HR database. Right, and for connecting to the JDBC, we need to add some first the sampler. I would say JDBC request, and here HR employee, and here then we have to actually add one config element. So that config is JDBC connection configuration, because we need to connect with the database. So we have to provide the database URL. So database URL is generally the connection string. So you can say JDBC connection string. Here you would provide the connection string for your thin client and your username and password. So you can just copy this. And here whatever is in square brackets needs to be replaced. So I'm writing here HR, and my password is whiteboxqa, and the host is localhost, and then port by default Oracle runs at 1521, and SID is XE. Then we have JDBT driver class. So driver is generally jdbc.oracle.driver. So oracle.jdbc.oracle driver. So you can just simply copy this. Then you can give username and password. Say pool 1. Select one from dual, and here you can say insert before pool 1. Now I want to write a select query. Select say star from employees, where employee ID is equal to 200, right? And then here I can again have to add the assertions. So again 200 assertions. It should be less than 500 milliseconds because it's residing on my system. Another thing is like when you are doing the JDBC connection, you need to have the jar to connect with JDBC. So that jar is basically OJDBC OJDBC 6.jar. So you need to download this jar and then add it to your JMeter where you have installed. So C apps JMeter. I think I installed, put it into lib. Yeah. So if you see here, you have to download that jar and copy into OJDB's this particular lib directory, and then you need to restart your JMeter. Unless and until you do this, you won't be able to make the connection. Right? So let me just disable this as well. So first I have to create the connection, ensure that everything is fine. Then select star from this and let's run this. Okay, I need to add these listeners. Let me see if my Oracle is running. Okay. It is running. And it should give some samplers also. Just taking some time to start the thread. Yeah, it is running fine. It throws some error. Could not return data source element. Okay, let me just stop it. It will take some time to stop. So I'm trying to make the connection. Let me make it 2 users. So and here instead of select statement, you can create a prepared select statement. For example, instead of 200, I put a question mark and I'll give values here, and I can say it is integer. So that you can give different. You are parameterizing the statement, so that also you can do. Just let me check the other things. Yeah. I've restarted my listener, so let's see if it works. Otherwise, I have to restart the machine. If I restart the machine, GoToMeeting would end. So let's try it once more. Otherwise, you can go through my previous batch recordings. It started the test. It is going to take some while to connect to Oracle driver. Once it is connected, then the test runs really fast. And you will see the output of the query. So whatever the query I have written, you will see that in XML format. So like for all the employee details, you would be seeing in that response data. Yeah, still it is running, it is connecting. Still throwing an exception. This is the request, and yeah, the listener is not working. That's the reason it's giving socket read timeout. Otherwise, this is the request that would be created. Select star from employees where employee ID is equal to 200, and yeah. Had it been cleared, you would have seen in response data the employee details, right? So try doing it at your end. You need to actually restart, make sure that the listener is also working fine. Yeah, I think the second request also it's gonna be the same thing. Meera, if had it been the problem with the 200, yeah, it would have given some other error. But anyway, you can actually go and change this to something else. So you can make it 198. And clear the logs. Run the test again. So let's say if it runs now. Socket read timed out error means the listener is not able to connect with the server, right? So it is an IO error not related to any of the query. So as I have told you, if had it been the right request, if the listener is also working fine, then you would see the in response data, you would see the employee details. So what then you can actually add assertions not only on the duration, you can add assertions like you can do functional testing also. So you can say response assertion, then you can add, let's say the let's say you want to say the name is Jennifer, so you want to check the pattern, then you can check for the text response, right, or the response message, that also you can do. But mostly what we are looking here for when we are doing database testing, especially the performance testing, so you would be finding like for running your test queries, there would be at least 50 to 60 queries that needs to be run. So for select queries, or maybe it could be an update query or any other query, it can be a read query or a write query. So which query is taking more time? So you have to, what you are looking for is duration in milliseconds. Okay, so how much time it is taking to connect with the database. Here we are surpassing the middleware. So we are directly connecting to the database. So if the issue or the bottleneck lies here at this particular stage, then you would be able to figure it out, and then definitely if it is here, then it's going to add up in the whole scenario. So your web application is actually accessing the database through these queries. So if this is taking time, and definitely the response time for your web app or HTTP sampler is definitely going to take a lot of time. So you can do these kind of things here, and then you have to also using this plus your query optimizers, as I've told you, like using Toad, or there are certain other query optimizers. You can actually figure it out, like at what column is taking so much of time. Then you can suggest that probably we can put some indexes on that column, or we can instead of joins we can use some subqueries. These kind of things you can suggest, and once the developer has made certain changes, then you can retest it, those changes using JMeter. Then you can see for the same query how much response time it is taking now, right?